The year is 2001. Back when Shrek just came out, Apple introduced the first ever iPod, and Microsoft released the first ever Xbox. Basketball was rapidly growing in Canada, which is internationally known as a hockey country. The biggest reason for this growth was one man, and his name was Vince Carter. If he makes this shot, he will not only make Raptor history, but make Canadian history. Let's bring it back to where it all started first. Carter landed with a relatively new franchise known as the Toronto Raptors. They were created in the NBA's expansion to Canada in 1995, where Toronto, along with Vancouver, each got a new NBA franchise. Vancouver's NBA team only lasted 6 years before being moved to Memphis. On the other hand, Toronto has been able to keep their team, in large thanks to Carter. The Raptors hired NBA legend Isaiah Thomas as their first vice president of basketball operations. Their first pick ever turned out to be the rookie of the year in his first season. His name is Damon Stoudemire. They even managed to beat the 72-10, which is the second best record in NBA history, Chicago Bulls team with the greatest basketball player ever, Michael Jordan, in their very first season. Things were looking good early on, but the struggles eventually came. In their first 3 seasons, they only won 67 out of 246 games. People thought that they would be the first team to be moved to a new city. That is until the 1998 NBA draft. Vince Carter was acquired in the 1998 NBA draft by the Raptors through a trade where they sent Carter's college teammate, Antoine Jamison, who they selected with the 4th pick, to Golden State for Carter, who was selected with the 5th pick. Vince Carter won Rookie of the Year in his first year, and that was just the beginning of his impact not only on the Raptor franchise, but on basketball in Canada.
For Vince Carter.
It's over! It's over, ladies and gentlemen!
In his second year, Vince Carter put on one of the greatest performances ever in the 2000 Slam Dunk Contest. In fact, Carter's teammate Tracy McGrady didn't even want to come to the contest because he said he knew Carter would win. Carter eventually convinced him to come anyways though. This performance not only was great for Carter, but for the game of basketball, especially in Canada. Kids were trying to imitate the dunks Carter was doing in their driveways. This was one big step forward for the game's increase in popularity in Canada. That same season, he led Toronto to their best record in franchise history while averaging 25.7 points per game, which was 4th best in the league at the time, and he made his first All-Star appearance. This led the Raptors to their first ever playoff appearance. Even though they didn't win a game in their first playoff series, the future looked bright behind Carter and his cousin and future Hall of Famer Tracy McGrady. This duo didn't last long due to McGrady's departure from the team in the 2000 offseason. Even without McGrady, the next season the Raptors set a new franchise record in wins with 47, while Carter made his second All-Star game and averaged a career-high 27.6 points per game. The Raptors won their first playoff series in franchise history in a back-and-forth series deciding game, which was sealed by a shot from point guard Alvin Williams. The next round, the Raptors would play NBA MVP Allen Iverson and the Philadelphia 76ers. The series came down to the final seconds of Game 7, where the Raptors were down by 1 with the basketball. They inbounded the ball to Vince Carter, who caught it on the wing 3-point line. He pump-faked his man and got his man in the air before shooting a 3-pointer that not only carried the weight of the team, but the weight of a whole country, watching and waiting for what could have been one of the greatest shots of all time. Everything Vince Carter had built and done for the sport of basketball in Canada had come to this climax. Unfortunately, the shot hit the back of the rim and was off. Carter took a lot of heat for going to his graduation the morning of the game, which fans and even some teammates thought didn't put him in the right state of mind for this game. This was a hard hit to what seemed to be an up-and-coming franchise. Carter addresses the situation in an interview he did a few years ago.
I was thankful for the opportunity, and I would take that shot again. When I got home to Toronto, I went to the gym, took that same shot 7 times in a row and made it for peace of mind.
As a teammate, you heard guys saying, messed up his routine, messed up our opportunity. Let's look now. You're playing now, and there's a young guy, you get a chance to go to a championship. Would you advise him to do the same?
Well, let me say this. Prior to that, the day before, I got there, I left. We had practice. I spoke to every player on the team, man to man, face to face. Told them what I was doing, what I'm trying to accomplish, when I'll be back. Do you have a problem with me doing that? Tell me, man to man. Every player on that team said, no, I think it's great. Go ahead. You have my blessing. Every player. Look on the news that night, 2 or 3 players all of a sudden had a change of heart. So it's a little disappointing. Now, if there was another player, it just depends on the situation. If it makes sense for the good of our team, go for it. Go for it. But you have to be willing to bear the responsibility that you have that night as well. That's being the go-to guy, that's being the leader, that's being our playmaker, whatever your job entails.
What Raptors fans didn't know was that this wasn't the last time this scenario would occur. In the following years, Carter suffered injuries which derailed the team and their championship aspirations and led the team into a bad stretch of years. Finally, in the middle of the 04-05 season, after demanding a trade, Carter was finally traded to the New Jersey Nets for 2 picks, 2 bums, and a former All-Star Alonzo Mourning who refused to even come to the city of Toronto, forcing the Raptors to buy out his contract. This trade cost the GM at the time, Rob Babcock, his job. The next 8 years were uneventful for the Raptors, so I'll quickly summarize them. In 2003, the Raptors got their 4th pick and drafted Chris Bosh, who would lead the Raptors for 6 years as one of the best power forwards in the basketball. In this era, many, and I mean many, bad draft picks were made, like drafting center Rafael Arroyo over future All-Star and Finals MVP Andre Iguodala. Outside of the bad picks, they managed to make the playoffs back-to-back years with Bosh leading them. The first year, they played against Carter and the Nets, but they lost in 6 games. They finished with the 3rd best record in the Eastern Conference and tied it for their franchise record 47 wins. The next year, they played the Orlando Magic, who they lost to in 5 games. In free agency in 2010, coming off his best individual season, Bosh left Toronto to join LeBron and Wade in Miami. Another superstar who left because he thought the team was going nowhere, 3 years removed from making a playoff appearance. From 2010 to 2013, the Raptors didn't make the playoffs, but had a new rising star on the team. The Raptors drafted DeMar DeRozan with the 9th overall pick in the 2009 NBA draft. DeRozan came out of college as an athletic freak, but lacked many other skills. After Bosh left Toronto, or before DeRozan emerged as a star, they were searching for the next player to lead the team. During this search, they traded for a young point guard named Kyle Lowry in the 2012 offseason, who they hoped could eventually replace Jose Calderon, who was near the end of his career. In the middle of the 2012 season, the Raptors acquired Rudy Gay, who they thought would be the answer to their search. That experiment failed miserably. After they started slow in the 13-14 season, they traded away Gay and handed the keys of the team to a young player who is getting better every year, DeMar DeRozan. This turned out to be a great decision as DeRozan and Lowry became one of the best backcourts in the NBA. DeRozan and Lowry each made 4 All-Star games while they played together and set countless Raptor records. This was the greatest run in Raptors franchise history as they made the playoffs 5 straight seasons. The problem was that there was one player who they couldn't overcome, and his name was LeBron James. And after being swept back-to-back years, and DeRozan not living up to expectations in the playoffs, the GM Masai Ujiri, who technically was the owner, but we all know he was the one who called the shots, made a trade that will go down in history. Before I go into this trade, I'm going to talk about the Carter Effect. This is the title of a documentary from last year that talks about the impact on Canadian basketball Carter had. The point of my documentary is to not only show the impact one shot can make on the city and a franchise, but to show you the magnitude a player can have on a city, especially in the case of Toronto, as they represent a whole country. The amount of Canadian NBA players has doubled over the last 5 years from the 5 years before that. Players like Jamal Murray, Andrew Wiggins, and Corey Joseph have all said their love for basketball began because of Vince Carter, and specifically, as I said before, from the dunk contest. This is just the beginning, as more and more Canadians are getting drafted each year. This year, there are more Canadians than ever entering the 2019 NBA draft, highlighted by RJ Barrett, who was a top 3 prospect in the draft. Vince Carter's mark has already been left on this country and is almost single-handedly responsible for the boom of basketball in Canada. Now back to the Raptors. Toronto traded face of the franchise DeMar DeRozan for unhappy superstar Kawhi Leonard. This trade wasn't initially received well from the Toronto fan base or by some of the players, specifically Kyle Lowry. Lowry and DeRozan became best friends in their time together in Toronto and believed that together they could deliver a championship to the city. Ujiri didn't see this happening and was forced to make a change. DeRozan felt betrayed by the franchise, leaving Lowry to feel betrayed by the franchise. They would both move on eventually, as Lowry and Ujiri had a sit-down together in February where they cleared the air. DeRozan has said that he's moved on, but still hasn't contacted Ujiri. Kawhi came to Toronto as a mystery player due to his injury that kept him out most of last season, and he had a quiet nature, so people didn't know much about him. He did finish third in MVP voting the year before the injury, so you couldn't deny his talent. This talent revealed itself more and more after each game he got healthier. This talent fully revealed itself during the playoffs. He led Toronto to 4 straight wins against the Orlando Magic in the first round after they lost the opening game. Now came the second round, where they played a familiar opponent, the Philadelphia 76ers. The difference was, this time Toronto had the best player. The series was back and forth, as Philly won games 2, 3, and 6, while Toronto won games 1, 4, and 5. It came down to Game 7. There couldn't have been a better ending. 18 years of what-ifs and the pain and suffering Raptors fans went through could all go away on this day. The game came down to the wire, tied at 90 with 4.2 seconds left on the clock. Kawhi Leonard just missed a free throw that could have put the Raptors up by 1, which led to a layup by the 76ers to tie the game. Fans were getting flashbacks of 2001. The pain and the suffering was just all coming back, and they were thinking the worst. 4.2 seconds to rewrite history. Kawhi Leonard catches the inbound at the top of the three-point line and dribbles hard to the right corner, and this is his favorite spot to shoot from. He is getting guarded by a big defender in Ben Simmons, and gets doubled by an even bigger defender in Joel Embiid. He manages to get away from Simmons and get a shot off over Embiid. The arena went quiet as once again a whole country watched and waited. The ball bounced on the rim and some people sighed, but then it bounced again and again and again. You can almost feel the 18 years passing by watching this shot. Finally though, it went in and a whole nation erupted. A guy who usually doesn't show a lot of emotion, and a guy who could be gone in a few months, but for that moment, he was the North. Now you're probably wondering why this documentary is called The Kawhi Effect. It's because Kawhi has written a whole new chapter in Canadian sports history, and I believe this will lead to another huge step forward for Canadian basketball. With Kawhi doing things like leading the Raptors to the finals and potentially their first championship, the future looks bright. That's what I call the Kawhi Effect.